Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services, the activities, the resources at medcommsnetworking.com, which are intended for the global medcoms community, by which I mean medical people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and indeed anybody who was interested in joining medcoms or finding out more about medcoms. So we're running these regular Wednesday webinars, which is a great way of involving more people from around the world, speakers, panelists, and audience members. And wherever possible, we record the session, and those recordings are posted later on NetworkPharma TV. If you can look at NetworkPharma TV, there's 250 plus videos now, so we're building up quite a useful collection of content. So today, absolutely delighted, and it is Open Access Week, isn't it, 2020? So absolutely delighted that Oxford PharmaGenesis and the Open Pharma team have again helped me put together a useful meeting, which is very topical for this week. I'm going to hand over to Chris Winchester from Oxford PharmaGenesis to introduce the panel, to lead the short presentation, and then a lively Q&A. And then I'll pop back up at the end probably just to say thank you. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks so much, Peter. And there we go. So, so welcome, and welcome to this special MedComms networking webinar, provocatively entitled Publishing Open Access Saves Lives. And we have a fantastic panel today and plenty of time for discussion. So please do submit your questions through the Q&A function. Today marks exactly 1 year since we launched the Open Pharma position statement on open access during Open Access Week 2019, in order to ensure that the highest quality peer-reviewed evidence is available to anyone who needs it, anywhere in the world. And we've had a tremendous response, both at the launch, and we were very proud to have coverage in the Telegraph, the ISMAP newsletter, and being picked up by a number of publishers and others. And in the time since. And we've now had a wonderful number of endorsements, 140 individuals, 9 publishers, and 31 organizational endorsements from pharmaceutical companies, patient groups, and research institutions. So there's a real recognition and support for the need for open access. And I think we can all see and recognize that open access is really entering the mainstream for our field, and that's very exciting. You can see there the ISMAP white paper, the MPIP coverage, and also EMWA. And just a little bit of a mention of some very interesting research here done by Shire and colleagues looking at the open access advantage and showing that actually you do get an increased number of citations per article if articles are published open access, even if they're those phase 3 articles that you assume are going to have the biggest coverage anyway. Now, some companies have taken a step beyond encouraging open access and actually to mandate open access. And you can see there that Shire, now part of Takeda, requires all of its research to be published open access. And there's this lovely quote here, you know, I never thought I'd be saying this to Big Pharma, but way to go, Shire, for this move. And Ipsen have followed suit, and we're looking forward to other companies joining that journey as well. That might be a topic we want to discuss later. And of course, open access is really the standard in academia, and research funders want to make sure they get the biggest bang for their buck, the money they invest in research. And so they really insist that people do publish open access to get the maximum impact. And really drawing to a close, and we'll then get stuck into the discussion, you can see that this very nice quote from Spark, who advocate for open access: even the best ideas remain just that until they're shared, until they can be utilized by others. The more people that can access and build upon the latest research, the more valuable that research becomes, and the more likely we are to benefit as a society, because more eyes make for smaller problems. And I think that's a lovely quote there. So I'm now going to throw it open for the panel discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing and bring us back. And I think maybe we could start with some introductions. maybe I can ask Durhane to make a start for us.
Thank you very, very much, Chris, and huge thanks to the organization for inviting me. I'm Durhane Wong-Rieger. I am President and CEO of the Canadian Organization for Rare Disorders. Just to say also, I'm Chair of Rare Diseases International, which is our international alliance of about 73 international rare disease groups located in about 150 countries. I also chair or co-chair a number of other patient alliances, one in Asia Pacific, and also served as a lead on our development work in getting global access to medicine. So really, really pleased to be a part of this.
Thank you, Durhane. And Valerie?
Yes, thank you, Chris. I'm Valerie Philippon. I'm the head of global publication at Takeda, and was actually the head of the global publication at Shire when we made open access a mandate. So very excited to be part of this panel discussion today. I'm also currently the chair-elect of ISMAP, the International Society of Medical Publication Professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gavin?
Hi, I'm Gavin Sharrock. I'm Senior Director of Operations and Business Development and the Corporate Solutions business within Wiley. So I work with our editorial teams, our marketing teams, and our account management sales teams, working with pharma and industry.
Thanks very much. And I'm Chris Winchester. I'm CEO of Oxford PharmaGenesis, a co-founder of Open Pharma, and a past chair of ISMAP. So thanks very much for joining us. So please do use the Q&A function to add your questions and comments. It's great to have the interactivity. And while we're waiting for those to come in, I've got a question maybe to get us started, which is what, in your view, are the most important benefits of pharmaceutical companies publishing their research open access? Who would like to go first? Can I ask Durhane?
Sure, I'd be real happy to. And let me kind of rephrase it just a little bit, because it isn't so much the benefits. I will maybe, as we're going along, weave in some of the feedback we've gotten, because since the first time I stumbled onto this group, and I will have to say literally stumbled onto the group, we've also done some surveying with our patient community to see kind of what their experience was in terms of trying to get access to journal articles, certainly in terms of research, and also the kind of solutions they have been able to work around. And I will say, the feedback we've gotten, it isn't just that it's a benefit. It is for people literally a matter of life and death. I have people who say, I have a very rare condition. Nobody knows anything about it. Unless I bring that information in, my physician hasn't got a clue. I'm trying to find kind of what is available in terms of diagnosis or treatments. The only way I can do it is by going to the journals. We have people internationally, just one comment from a patient in India, I was able to find the diagnosis and bring that information in, but it took me, she said, literally a week of searching around to find a way of getting access to that information. So for us, it's not a nice to have. When we ask, our feedback from patients, how important is it for you to be able to have access to journal articles? Fully 85% of the people said it was either very important or important. So for us, it ranks very high. And I will say, sadly, and the same survey, 65% of the people said it was very difficult to get access to what they wanted.
Thanks very much, Durhane. And Gavin, what are your thoughts?
We get asked this question quite a lot. I'd say the benefits are pretty obvious. I've not heard many people say that open research and making articles open is a bad thing. It's generally accepted that open access, open collaboration, open research, access to data and code and reporting protocols, they're all a good thing. They can certainly be an accelerator of knowledge. They can be accelerator of developments. Open access aids discoverability. We know all of this. The question that we've got as publishers and other interested stakeholders in this is, how do we transform the industry in a sustainable way? And it's one of the reasons that we're we're very happy to back, Wiley's very happy to back the Open Pharma movement because of the desire to move in a sustainable way to a more open access future. And we can't argue with the idea that pharma should have the same rights and the same terms as non-industry authors. That makes a lot of sense to us.
Thanks very much. And Valerie?
Yeah, thank you. So maybe to share a little bit of our experience at Shire when we did, mandate the open access, one of the key drivers was really to make our research accessible to all practitioners, all healthcare practitioners, in order, to eventually shorten the patient journey to diagnostic. Shire, as you all know, we're really focused in rare disease, and we all know, talking to patient association, that it takes a very long time for some patients to get diagnosed, like multiple visits to like so many physicians. And by, mandating an open access to us was really with the ultimate goal to have, all those healthcare practitioners, the pediatricians, the general practitioners that don't necessarily have time to spend, a lot of their personal time looking through the literature, gaining access to the journal, to have this access immediately, so they could, when they just saw a patient and have a question, could directly access our research. So that certainly is, we had the patient in mind ultimately, even though obviously, our primary audience is the healthcare practitioner. And glad to hear that the patients are also benefiting directly by, increasing their knowledge in running the research. But it was, definitely for us, the primary benefit was really, the direct impact in patient care and patient diagnosis.
Thanks very much, all of you. So I've got a question here that we've got some questions coming in, and we've got some things coming in on the chat as well. I mean, just a detailed one maybe to pick up first, but one of the comments in the chat is a week is very short compared to what patients are looking for. And maybe just to clarify that Open Access Week is a week of advocacy rather than saying just publications will be open for this week. It's about advocating in this week for year-round open access and enduring open access. The theme of Open Access Week this year is equity. And I wondered if you as a panel had any comments on how open access can support equity, or if there are other things we should be doing as publication professionals to support equity.
Big question, Chris. It's very early in the US to be very deep question. But maybe to center that question around open access and access, Durhane talked about, patients in India. I think, the great thing about open access is it doesn't matter, what places in the world you are. And some journal actually, to hand it to a bunch of publishers, actually had for a long time different open access and letting, the healthcare practitioner in developing country access their publication for free, and having sort of us in Europe and the US paid for publication, which was already more equitable, because we all know that academics and doctors in a different country have access to very different type of library, medical library, and so on. So I think there's been quite a bit of work done by the publishing world to actually open, their science and their medical publication. Obviously, we can always do more, but I'm really interested to hear what Gavin thinks about, how the publisher role in opening up and being more equitable.
Yeah.
So, so the publishers do actually take their responsibilities here very seriously. We as publishers are well aware that access to research is helpful. It aids patients, it aids healthcare practitioners, it aids researchers, and we've done a lot over the last 10 years to to move in this direction. I think it's worth acknowledging the progress that's been made across the board. Access has already been expanded to thousands of institutions over the last 10 years. Thousands of articles have been made available in certain periods. The COVID-19, there's thousands of articles we've made available and licensed openly, and with other crises as well. There's a public access initiative that's been in action in the UK for some years now. That means that anyone that goes into a public library can access material. And at Wiley, our policies have always permitted authors to send their articles to anyone who asks for them. So there's a lot that's being done here. The question, going back to what I said at the start, the question is, how do we do this in a sustainable manner? Sustainable for the industry, but also sustainable for the stakeholders that we work with in the industry. But Wiley, a lot of our publishing is done with medical societies and other research societies. And it's very important that they are part of the research ecosystem, and they have issues about remaining sustainable financially and providing value to the research ecosystem. So it's a case of moving the whole industry in a way that actually holds together the key stakeholders.
So Chris, can I just jump in for a second? I mean, I love kind of what you're saying here, and you know, the challenge, and I think some of the suggestions we got back from, as I say, with our patient survey as well, was why can't we move? You know, we asked things like, what about subsidized subscriptions for patients or public? What about, especially low and middle income countries, should we make it extremely cheap? And people sort of said, yes, but, you know, it really shouldn't be that. And in fact, in some cases, you couldn't make it cheap enough. Why is the burden falling upon the users? Why doesn't, you know, the industry, why don't the publishers take on that burden, you know? And, you know, we give examples like Cochrane, you know, you can get a whole city, you can get a country to agree that they will make a subscription and make it available. As you say, in a public library, that's an interesting solution, but why do I have to go to a public library to get access to that information? I mean, I have a public library. And again, I go back to, I agree in terms of the woman in India. She didn't say it took her a week to get all of her information. It took her a week to find one article. That was what she was chasing down. So this is our challenge. So the suggestion, you know, we're hearing back is don't put the burden on those who are least able and have the most need for it. Put the burden back in terms of the others.
That's great, and I can see a rationale that we're the experts, and if we'll learn how to navigate publishing, and open access means that maybe other groups don't have to become experts in order to access the information. So yeah, Great question. There's a lot of interest on the Q&A about mandatory open access, and there are two questions really, actually more than two, about mandatory open access and whether it's been adopted across Takeda as well, now that Takeda's taken over Shire. That's one question, and related to that, you know, how about beyond that? Do the panel see that it's likely that other companies will follow suit? What are your views on where other companies are? What are the barriers maybe, and what can we do to facilitate that? So maybe I can throw that one into the mix. I mean, Valerie, would you be happy to take a lead with that one?
Sure, I can start. So to answer this very specific question around Takeda, so we're still integrating the companies, right? So the Shire acquisition was last year in 2019. We're still working through, like, you know, a pretty big company, Shire was. Takeda is an even bigger company, so it's taking us a while. So we're definitely looking into what we could do. Just as a side note, we actually looked around, you know, our publishing like our activities, both on the Shire and the Takeda side, and the publication are, you know, by large majority already in open access, even without a mandate. On the non-Shire Takeda side of the organization, there is, you know, most of the publication are open access, but not all. So definitely, you know, that's something we're looking into. And to broaden up to, you know, the larger pharma organization, it's been actually pretty slow compared to what I was hoping it would be when we launched the mandate at Shire in 2018. As you mentioned on one of your slides, I think the only other company that has a clear mandate is Ipsen, and they made that mandate a year later. So can say that it was broadly adopted by the pharma industry. It wasn't. I think talking to my colleague, a lot of our publication professionals are certainly interested in open access, and many of our, overall pharma publication is already published in open access, but it's not 100%. And we can go into some of the details of why that is, but I think there is sometimes the complexity of the organization. There is maybe Takeda name and the, affiliation of the authors, but there is multiple, business unit and, country that are involved. So, everybody is sometimes following slightly different processes. There is, the cost of publishing open access for some teams. And then there is, the different policies that certain publisher and journal have regarding, providing open access to research funded by pharma. Not everybody, not every journal is actually allowing pharma to publish in open access. So, there is a lot of moving pieces there. But hopefully I answered that first question, and thanks.
Yeah, so if I can jump in, there's two parts to this. The first one is, what are the barriers to pharma? And then should we be pushing towards more mandatory policies? So in terms of what are the barriers, I think the biggest, and Valerie, you've just picked up on it there, I think the biggest barrier to pharma is the certain restrictions that certain publishers and journals put on open access from pharma, I should point out. Wiley's taken the view that we treat pharma-funded content in the same way that we treat any other content. So we allow pharma to purchase open access, which isn't always the case with other publishers and journals. And we also don't charge them a premium. So if you're a pharma-funded author, a pharma author, or you're a non-pharma author, you're going to be charged exactly the same. So that's our position. And we would urge other publishers and journals to follow that. We know that they don't all do that. That, I think, is the biggest barrier. Whether we should be pushing for more mandatory open access policies, we should certainly be advocating for more open access. I think we need to be a little bit careful about mandatory open access policies, certainly in pharma, when you've got things like academic freedom in play about having non-pharma authors on papers. So I would say to pharma that yes, you should be advocating, and yes, you should have open access policies, but be careful that they're not too rigid. They don't have too many stipulations, for example, that you can't use hybrid open access unless you do certain things, or it's got to be on a CC BY license. So try and keep some kind of flexibility. And I've seen that the open access policies that I've seen pharma put in place do have some level of margin and wiggle room in them, which is great because they're a bit more considered. They're encouraging open access, they're pushing for open access, but they're not allowing a backlash from certain authors. So I can encourage pharma to continue down the path they're on. Keep policies simple, don't put overly onerous requirements on co-authors that maybe you don't have a direct connection to. Keep in mind that authors are largely unaware of the details of the policies that apply to them anyway. So they need help with that. But we should be moving to more open access across the board. Mandating it with restrictions can be counterproductive.
Thanks very much, Gavin. And maybe I can come back to Valerie to pick up on some of those points. What have Gavin's raised the question of academic freedom, and I was interested to know what response you've had from your authors to the introduction of a policy, a mandatory open access policy.
Sure, and if you don't mind, Chris, let me bring up another point that Gavin just made before answering your question, which is around, the restriction of open access as we define it, in pharma as well, not just the journal. So indeed, I think, the devil is in the detail, right? So when Shire mandated open access, we actually had a really broad definition of open access. We left out the immediate part of open access. So we did allow our scientists and researchers to publish in journals that may have a delay in open access. So let's say 6 months or 12 months, of a paywall before making the publication open access. So we try to find a balance between, really ensuring that, eventually the publication would be open access, but try to be not too limited. In the same way, we didn't put any restriction. We had the recommendation, but no restriction in the type of copyright license we were asking our authors to select. So certainly, we stand behind the fact that we had open access, but we define it in a very precise way in our policy in order to really strike a balance and make sure we cover, a pretty large range of journals. So going back to academic freedom, and yes, the authors are definitely the one deciding, what journal the article would be submitted to. Obviously, the journal has a choice to accept it or not, so it's not always where the manuscript is published. But I think, we actually had a situation when we did prepared for the mandate at Shire, where we had to really go back to the authors team, because the first choice journal was actually not part of, would not comply to our future policy. That was going to be a couple of months down the line. So we could have taken the approach of be like, well, the policy is not yet in place. So, let's this team, continue with their first selection of the journal, even though it's not going to be open access in 6 months when it gets published. But we actually decided to discuss with this author team, and there was a lot of academic investigators on the manuscript about the really advantage of open access and why, Shire was, working in the background to develop that policy and what the ultimate goals were. And I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier on, but we had a very, broad endorsement by the full authorship, the full author list and in that particular manuscript. And everybody was like very excited in terms of like us being the trailblazer in the industry and, moving toward the mandate. So they actually, were very receptive, and, then saying, we're like, all right, we're behind you guys, and yeah, let's pick another journal. So, we can do our part ourselves and making that research accessible to everybody. So yeah, it was a quite enthusiastic response by most of the academic we work with.
Brilliant, thanks. Durhane, have anything to add on this question?
The only thing I'd add really is that the academic freedom question, authors generally have a lot of respect for those long-lived journals that have represented their fields for many years, they're part of the fabric of their research experience, and it can create a real conflict for them. So mandating open access where there's absolutely no wiggle room can put authors in a very difficult position, which will become less and less as more authors, more journals move to having open access options, of course. But at the moment, it can put them in a very difficult position.
At the same time, if I may just continue for another minute on this topic, this is exactly what the foundation and academic founder have been doing, right? Is mandating open access when they provide a grant to researchers. So, I don't feel like, pharma is being restrictive or like, overly restrictive if we, move into a mandate, because, we're not the first one, and a lot of, and we are funding the research, right? So we're in the same situation that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, in terms of like, we are more than happy to collaborate and fund research, but, comes with a few strings attached, and some are, well accepted by everybody. Disclosure, we're always going to disclose who funded the research and what, potential conflict of interest author may have. I mean, it's a term of transparency, but I think in terms of accessibility, it's just the next level. And, that the foundation and public funder have been, the first one to implement that.
And could I just, this may be a bit of a tweak comment, but if I can just add, I don't know of any medical journal at Wiley that doesn't have an open access capability. It doesn't offer open access. So from Wiley's point of view, mandated open access by pharma wouldn't be a problem for us. All of our journals offer it.
And so what's been the experience then in terms of introducing a policy? What proportion of journals that you were would have been wanting to go to, or perhaps you went to in the past, Valerie, would it be open access, either immediate open access or open access after a period behind a paywall, versus those that were really only subscription content?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank Wiley as a publisher, because, and we didn't rehearse this, but not only you guys offer open access to everybody and all your journal as this option, but you also been very collaborative and allowing us, when we decided Takeda to actually go back to some key publications that were unfortunately, published prior to our mandate. And we were really missed the opportunity there. And we went back to a lot of publishers to ask for retrospective open access. You were the first one to say yes. And you gave us open access to all the publications we requested. So there is definitely, a lot of the publishers that are, in the same category and are, really opening up the door to open access to pharma-funded research, but not everybody. So we did do, quite a bit of a survey on database before deciding to move ahead with a policy at Shire. And, it's a minority of journals that, are outside the scope of the policy. But, there is some very prominent journals, right? So Elsevier, to name it, it doesn't have, all their journals accessible to pharma research on an open access format. So it's definitely been a challenge, to work with a few journal and publisher in terms of trying to get open access. And it's sometimes not very easy to read the policy on the website. So that's one thing, I guess, if I could, a little shout out to the publisher and the medical journals, there is so many different types of open access. I know it's complicated. There is hybrid journal. There is, specific copyright license type. But it's also, those journals and those publishers that have, different policy around, depending if the science, the research is funded by a private foundation or an academic, public funder, kind of follow different rules. If it's a pharmaceutical research, that is sometimes very unclear from the website. And, we kind of discover what the true policy is of that publisher when we are basically submitting a publication and trying to trigger open access. So, it's a little tricky sometimes. But yeah, there is, a couple of prominent journals, such as the Lancet family of journals, that do not provide open access to pharma-funded research. And, been a limit.
Even though they provide open access to research funded by other funders, yeah, and that's I think to echo the comment why Wiley's commitment to a level playing field is so fantastic.
So can I make a comment just to jump in, Chris, and listening to the discussion and understand back and forth? What I will say is that I think one of the reasons why this is continuing so long in terms of lack of access is certainly patients and public have no idea. I mean, even for me, coming into it, you don't, there's the status quo. Yes, everything has to be subscription. You don't even really think about the options. I think one of the questions I saw here was about COVID, and certainly COVID has done that for everybody, but it also has done it for the patients and the public. It basically is, we have a right to this information. And quite frankly, when you think about patients who have participated in research, I mean, who does the data belong to anyway? It belongs to us. It belongs to all of us. And I think we will see increasingly that movement. The challenge is that we don't know what we don't know. Without this open access, without the Open Pharma, I think a lot of people had no idea that these are in fact options, that there are other ways. I mean, you introduced me to the unpay wall, and it's like, oh, I didn't even know that existed, which is a great workaround in the short term, that there are in fact ways in which we can get access. But again, we're left out of that discussion. So I think, I really feel a huge responsibility in some respects for us to be out there. That's why we did the survey. What do we know? And what we're finding is that the patients and the public have no idea. But I think once they begin to understand that the options are there, they will demand it. And I think the companies, the journals, the researchers will all have no option but to actually move in that direction and to be able to find it. So yes, the public library, the unpaid wall, the other kinds of things are kind of great workarounds. They don't work for everybody, obviously. And, you know, many of our responses from people in low middle income countries says that's not going to help us. You know, so we've got to find ways that are truly open. So I do think these are important discussions, but I really think that it cannot just happen between the companies and the researchers and the journals. I think it's going to be, you know, something that the public is going to demand. And so I'm happy to see this moving. I think the other thing I'll say very quickly, because I saw it in one of the questions, and it's so important. I know we've had that discussion before. I mean, and we got that response back. It's great that I get access to the information. If I can't understand it, what good is it? So we do have to have the other option, and that is these plain language summaries. Coincidentally, I had a great conversation with a group of students that were at one of our major universities here in Canada. They have a review, which they actually use, and this is in the rare disease space, where they actually write summaries of articles. They will do it for their interest, but we can also request it, not demand it. Here's an article, can you put it into a plain language? So they have a whole review that just writes plain language summaries of important journal articles. And that's so important. And we've seen it in the research now, right? You get a grant, you must have a plain language summary of it. Cochrane, we think is amazing. You've got to have a plain language summary of it. We think that this is going to also become increasingly the norm. Yes, here's the information. Can we also make sure that authors have to have a plain language summary of it that is in fact accessible? So I think all of these things are moving in that same direction. And I think we will see, you know, a lot more pressure once this is known in terms of a possibility.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
I couldn't agree more.
Go ahead, Valerie. Yeah.
I was going to say, I couldn't agree more. The plain language summary is something we're really looking into in the organization as well, you know, and we definitely have been, you know, already putting on our website, both the Shire and Takeda website, the two legacy entities that, you know, we now reconfigured it, all the plain language summary related to the clinical trial, right? Because we certainly come from a place where, like, you know, the patient absolutely need to understand what they're participating in, and they need to see the results as well. It's not just, you know, the informed consent when you're participating in a clinical trial. It's like, you know, obviously you're being followed for your own personal experience in the trial, but understanding what, you know, the overall data is. It's really, there is a lot of interest from all of the patients and the volunteer participating in the trial. So we definitely brought it up, and we're not the only one. I think pharma in general has a lot of transparency and accessibility activities in the background, and trying to make sure, like, you know, the clinical trial summaries are not only, you know, for HCPs, but also have a plain language option. I think, you know, it's taken us a while to understand that the patient have that much interest in the scientific and medical publication, but I think we really got it. It's been loud and clear. So it's, from our perspective, it's like, you know, like we are looking into making also plain language summary of key publication. You know, one of the restrictions we have is making sure we're applying the same rules to, like, all the trials, right? Not just the one that worked great and not the one that failed. So, and making it accessible. So it's not just developing the summary, right? It's like making it in a centralized place, and, you know, like to brainstorm with this team today in terms of, like, what that place would be. You know, should it be like on a company's website, or should it be really associated with the journal publication itself? And some journals, some publishers definitely have a short summary in plain language of their key publications. So, you know, how could we work together to ensure that the patient, all patients, and all the public, not just the patient, obviously the caregiver and all the public that are particular interest in some medical activity can really have access, you know, and, you know, so where should that reside? Turning to Gavin, if you don't mind me talking a little bit here, Chris.
Yeah, so plain language summaries has come up in fact, a lot more recently. The question here, when you're talking about whether a plain language summary is a good thing to do, of course it is. It makes the content more accessible to more people. The question is, how do you do it as an industry? So how do you scale plain language summaries across tens of thousands, in fact, hundreds of thousands of articles that are published? Because someone needs to do that, and someone needs to pay for it if it's not the author. We encourage authors to do plain language summaries. If the authors can do them, that's great. We've been asked whether journals can take it on themselves to provide plain language summaries of all of their articles. There's very few journals that have the resources to be able to do that. So the question is, how do we, not whether it's a good idea, but how do we implement it across a vastly complex and large industry with a lot of content, and how do we make it accessible and discoverable in an easy way? And they're big questions. You need infrastructure to do that. And one of the things that we've hit, which has been quite interesting, is that we have spoken to a lot of our society partners. Wiley has got a high proportion of our journals are owned by society, so they're the ones that actually decide whether they engage in these types of initiatives. There's been a lot of societies that have said, yes, this looks great, but it's not our job to educate the public. It's not our job to educate patients. We're there for the healthcare professionals. And this isn't something that we can put resource behind, because there are other more important things that we can do. So it's a complex question. We actually link up at Wiley. So a lot of other publishers do this as well. We link up with a service called Kudos, which allows authors and encourages authors to promote their article, to write plain language summaries, to post them in different places. So we certainly do encourage it. We certainly push authors. Trying to do it on a large scale is complex.
Right, well, thanks very much. I think we are drawing to a natural sort of break here. I'm going to hand back to you, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks. For the people who are used to watching these webinars, it might be strange as it is for me to sit here quietly listening to this. And certainly open access is something that I've been excited about for 10 years or something. And I remember the first meetings I ran 10 years ago. And it just feels like it feels like progress is very slow. And I'm intrigued. We've got a lot of questions, a lot of comments coming in here. And I think there's just a lot we could discuss. Unfortunately, we've got a limited time today. Huge thanks to the audience, for the panelists and so on, and to the audience for joining in. But we are going to wrap up now. I just wanted to perhaps just finish up very briefly by putting out a call to action. You know, I can jump up and down and go, isn't open access just a bit of a no-brainer? But what can, Chris, maybe, you know, just a clear call to action. Is it appropriate to say to people, look, go and support the Open Pharma position statement? You know, what can they do within their own organizations? Is it just more of us need to be a bit more excitable, and pharma needs to take a bit more of a lead rather than dancing around some of the issues? Just a moment, Chris, yeah?
Thanks very much. Well, thank you, Peter. It would be wonderful to have some additional endorsements of the Open Pharma position statement from organizations and from individuals. There's no barrier to anyone who agrees with the aims to sign up. And we really want that groundswell of opinion. So please do go to the openpharma.blog and you can find it there. I think we can all advocate for open access. Actually, you know, we can do amazingly well with a mandate. We can still do really well. You can see companies like GSK and Pfizer and many others actually as well getting quite good rates of open access through education. And so we've got to help people move on from being focused on high impact factor journals that may advance an academic career or their CV to actually think, well, what are we trying to do here? Do we want to make sure that this research has the biggest impact? And that might actually be the way to go. So just helping our authors see beyond the simple kind of hierarchy of journals when thinking about journal choice is something very practical that we've done. And at Oxford PharmaGenesis, we've introduced a mandatory open access policy. I mean, clearly, we don't publish to the same level as many people on this call, but we publish our own research, and actually we put in a mandatory CC BY policy, which is the gold standard open access, and as a result we've got CC BY from BMJ Publishing and other publishers as well. So don't be afraid to give that a go. I can highly recommend it. So thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. So thank you ever so much, all of you, for joining in the panel. To those of you who are listening today, don't rush away, because we have got 10 minutes or so when we can carry on talking. But thank you very much to everybody. I'm going to say for you, I hope you're all going to agree with me, that if anybody out there is listening or watching the video later on, they can reach out, and LinkedIn is the obvious way to reach out to you guys and make some contact. I know you're all very keen to hear feedback and comments. The Open Pharma blog has been mentioned. So from my point of view, I hope that many people on the call will know what I'm doing at medcommsnetworking.com, but if you don't, go and have a look. There's lots and lots of stuff happening, and lots of resource at places like NetworkPharma TV, where you'll, as I say, you'll find 250 plus videos and so on. So to the global MedComms community out there, please do join in. I'd just like to say a big thank you, and I like to have a little wave from the panel while I stop the recording. So everyone together, just a little wave, bye.